If you're wondering what a post-apocalyptic world looks like, come to Florida in 2025. Once the vacation paradise of America, where people dreamed of retiring, seeking sunshine, or starting a new life, Florida is now gradually turning into a living ruin, crushing the American dream. Children grow up in tents, the elderly sleep under bridges, and even SWAT officers refuse to step into certain areas. This is no longer an ordinary crisis. This is a collapse of order, of humanity, and of faith in an America that once promised no one would be left behind. In today's video, we will bravely step into the terrifying hidden corners of Florida, a place that is gradually becoming a hell on earth for tens of thousands of homeless people, where neighborhoods that once sparkled with lights are now filled with trash, makeshift tents, and the desperate eyes of those with nowhere left to go. Once hailed as America's retirement paradise, Florida is the place people dream of after working long enough, saving enough, and hoping for a peaceful life under the warm sun and the sound of the waves. But nowadays, this very place is becoming one of the most painful focal points of the homelessness crisis, a bitter paradox between its dazzling exterior and the harsh reality. You don't need to delve deep into alleys or remote rural areas to see the collapse. Just turn into an intersection in Orlando, or drive through the outskirts of Tampa or Miami, and you'll see homelessness in Florida is no longer a discrete social phenomenon. It is a simmering pandemic. A large crack is tearing apart the American dream amidst the palm trees and seemingly peaceful beaches. On the sidewalks of cities that were once dream vacation destinations, rows of makeshift tents made of plastic tarps, scrap wood, and even old cars have sprung up as part of the urban landscape. Under the blazing sun, the elderly wash their faces at public taps. They use old suitcases as cabinets, cardboard as beds, and parking lots as shelters. Passers-by hurriedly rush by. No one dared to look at the people curled up on the sidewalk for long. Perhaps because they fear encountering the reflection of their own future in those tired and wrinkled eyes. Florida currently reports more than 31,462 homeless people, a number that is steadily increasing each year. But behind that number lies a bitter truth. More and more of them once had jobs, once paid taxes, once lived by the rules. An event, such as illness, job loss, or the death of a loved one, is enough to push them to the bottom of the abyss of despair. Not because they didn't try, but because the path back has been blocked by average housing prices exceeding $2,300 a month, an endless list of social housing, and a nearly paralyzed subsidy system. Local authorities, the police, non-profit organizations, all have stepped in. But like bailing water out of a sinking ship, those efforts only delayed the inevitable, unable to address the root of the problem. Even the SWAT team was once deployed to restore order in some overcrowded areas, but then withdrew, leaving behind a system that was powerless against the very people it had promised to protect. Florida did not collapse overnight. It is slowly cracking, from the cheap motels filled with full-time workers who can't afford rent, from the gas stations becoming places to wash up, from the fearful looks of the older generation when they realize even old age is no longer a safe haven. And if this can happen in Florida, once considered the final refuge for the dream of rest and peace, then is there anywhere in America that we can truly call home? Or are all that remain just temporary tents in a society that has forgotten how to care for those who built it? There are old turtles in Florida, once knew exactly where to swim, once instinctively found their familiar sandy shores each breeding season. But then that beach is no longer the same. The sand was turned up to build resorts, and the lights from the luxurious restaurants disoriented them. And so, the turtles keep crawling around in the night, exhausted on the artificial sandy shore, never able to return to the ocean. Maria is like one of those turtles. At the age of 63, she's one of thousands of elderly people in South Florida living on the brink of survival. On sweltering nights in Miami-Dade, when people draw the curtains and turn on the air conditioning, Maria begins her second shift of the day. She works as a security guard, often doing night shifts with 7 nights of work each week. But even though she works so hard, she still doesn't have enough money to rent a decent place to sleep. And because she doesn't have enough money to afford a roof over her head, she can't even dream of a full night's sleep. Amid the darkness and the quiet streetlights, Maria parked her old car in a familiar corner of the lot. That car is where she lives, where she sleeps, and also the only shelter for the small dog she always keeps by her side. Every morning, she goes to wash her face at the tap near the public trash can. And if she's lucky, she might find a quiet corner to take a nap for 2 hours before her next shift. Maria represents those who were once the backbone of the community. Those who did everything right, but are now abandoned in the very city where they once entrusted their youth and dreams. According to representatives of the local social organization, the elderly are currently the most vulnerable group in the entire housing crisis in Florida, because they no longer have time to start over. There is no longer an opportunity to increase income or move to another state. They are gradually losing not only their shelter, but also their sense of belonging. Of course, there are people trying to help. Social organizations have doubled their efforts to find temporary housing, connect support programs, and even call on landlords to open their doors for rental at humanitarian prices. But with the skyrocketing rental prices in South Florida, especially when the average price of an apartment is double the income, those efforts are like small buoys in a big wave. The homeless here do not demand anything. They just want to find a place to be a human being with the right to rest in peace. But reality is putting them in a position where they have to fight to keep the last remaining pieces of their dignity. Florida used to be a place where people came to start a new life. But now, for people like Maria, it feels like a place to try. Not to be completely submerged in the wave of despair. And if even those who still work every night, still believe in the value of labor, still try to preserve their dignity in silence, cannot survive in a place once called the Promised Land, then is America still a place to return to? Or has it become an artificial sandbar where old turtles are forever lost? Florida, once a peaceful ending point for a long life of labor, has now become a place where dreams are taxed, even when all one wants is a place to lie down. Starting in October, a new law will officially take effect statewide, prohibiting sleeping and camping in public places, from beaches, parks, sidewalks to underpasses. The law requires counties to build designated encampments, places with restrooms, security, and mental health support. However, the condition is only when the official shelter system is overloaded. In other words, the homeless now not only lack a roof over their heads, but even the right to rest in the middle of the night is gradually being considered illegal. The authorities call it an effort to keep the streets clean and safe. But behind that noble intention lies fear, anger, and a sense of being erased from social life that many homeless people face every day. On Broward Boulevard, others heard about the new law with feelings of confusion and anger. They don't want to see us, so they make laws to erase us from the community, a middle-aged man said while pulling a shopping cart full of personal belongings. I used to have a home. I used to have a wife and children. Now I have to find a place to sleep after each sunset, as if I am a threat to society. And while the Supreme Court prepares to hear a case in Oregon, where a law punishing people for sleeping outside is being challenged due to the lack of shelter, in Florida, the law has already taken a step forward. Florida was once the final destination of the American dream, a place where people dreamed of resting and enjoying the sunset of their lives. But now, that dream has been taxed, even when people have nothing left to give. If it is only because of poverty, fatigue, or the lack of strength to squeeze into an overloaded system, that an elderly person is considered a criminal for trying to find a place to sleep peacefully, then do we still see them as part of this society? Or have we unconsciously pushed them out, simply because they make it difficult for us to face reality? Florida is not just about blue seas and sunshine. Behind the glittering facade of postcards lie forbidden zones that even SWAT teams hesitate to enter. In some areas north of Miami-Dade and west of Palm Beach, tent encampments have formed like an invisible city. A place with no clear laws, no stable medical services, and where no one really cares about what happens each night. A police officer once shared with the local newspaper, "We are trained to handle crime, but here no one is committing any clear crimes." We are facing a different kind of crisis, one that even with enforcement tools, we can't solve anything. One night, the rescue team had to wear protective gear to bring an elderly man with a severe infection out of the camp. He had been lying there for 3 days in the heat of over 100 degrees, unnoticed by anyone. In Jacksonville, there is an abandoned lot behind the old container yard. More than 40 people live there. No electricity, no water, no toilet. The entire area has no official address, because on the city map, it does not exist. But for people like a former construction worker or a veteran, it is the last place that can still be called home. In a security situation assessment in early 2025, the police advised SWAT not to intervene in 3 areas deemed too crowded, too unstable, too prone to violence. Some young officers describe those places as grey areas, places where the law cannot control, but also cannot abandon. The paradox lies in the fact that people fear these places not because the people in them are dangerous, but because they are too desperate. And nothing is more dangerous than a community pushed to the wall, where all social values have been eroded to the core. Florida used to be a resort, a place to start anew, where people place their hopes for a brighter life. But in those nameless forbidden zones, the American dream is not just being left behind. It is rotting away day by day, right on the very land it was once promised. And if even the police, those tasked with protection, do not dare to step in, then who will be brave enough to stand up for the last dignity of those living on the edge of society in oblivion? Florida was once called a retirement paradise, where those who have worked their whole lives come to rest, relax, enjoy the sunshine, and spend their final days by the blue sea and white sand. But nowadays, for many elderly people, that dream has become a burden, not just financially, but also mentally and in terms of dignity. Rental prices in areas like Miami, Fort Lauderdale, or Naples have nearly doubled over the past decade. A 1-bedroom apartment in South Florida now averages over $2,000 per month, far exceeding the payments from pensions, social security, or minimum wage that the elderly can earn from part-time jobs. They used to have a home, had plans. There is hope, but a hike in utility prices, a new prescription not covered by insurance, a one-time support for children in need, could also be the spark that causes everything to collapse. Many people have paid taxes for decades, but when they reach the age when they need protection, they become invisible in the very system they once nurtured. Many elderly people have no one to rely on, but they also don't want to become a burden. They live quietly and silently, trying to preserve every piece of their dignity by washing their faces every morning at public faucets or carefully covering themselves before sleeping next to the supermarket. Florida is not necessarily the harshest place, but perhaps because it was once considered an ideal destination, the fall is more painful, deeper, and easier to forget. And if a state once dubbed the place to rest after a lifetime of dedication becomes a place where the elderly have to collect cans to survive, then the dream of retirement in America is truly becoming too expensive. So, what will happen if the generation that built America today can no longer afford to rest on the very land they once built? Are we allowing old age, once a time to be cherished, to become a sentence that everyone must carry out in silence? There was a time when a simple dinner of stew, mashed potatoes, and a slice of cake was a given for every middle-class American family. Not luxurious, but sufficient, cozy. That's what many people still think they will have until the end of their lives, especially in Florida, which was once likened to a retirement paradise with year-round sunshine and abundant food. However, in a state where hundreds of bustling supermarkets still open every day, thousands of people are having their last dinner on park benches, if they're lucky. Otherwise, they just drink tap water, eat leftover bread, or rummage through trash bins behind grocery stores. In Miami-Dade, dozens of elderly people line up from 5 a.m. just to receive a bag of emergency food, usually consisting of a few cans of food, instant noodles, and expired cookies. They don't ask for anything special. They just need something to soothe their empty stomachs. What makes one choke is not just the sight of the elderly having to eat leftovers, but the bitter irony behind it. Florida is one of the fastest growing states in real estate, luxury tourism, and medical technology, while a small group of the wealthy enjoy lavish parties with lobster and wine on yachts. Just a few blocks away, those who have paid taxes for 40 years are starving because they can't afford milk. In a society where a food delivery app takes only 15 minutes to bring a $30 meal, the fact that an elderly person has to cut vitamins into small pieces to last through hunger is truly a sad paradox. And this is not just the story of the homeless. Many people still have homes and cars, but they're eating like it's a crisis because they no longer have the budget to balance between medication, utilities, and food. Florida has a high rate of elderly people living alone, and many of them choose to remain silent, not asking for help due to pride, until their health deteriorates. You can lose your home, but there is still hope. Losing a job, you can still find your way again. But when you lose the ability to have a decent meal, what you are losing is a fundamental part of human dignity. And if a country that was once great enough to send people to the moon can no longer guarantee a basic meal for the generation that built it, then do we still remember what we once lived for? Florida was once considered a model in developing retirement and welfare policies and attracting elderly people to live there. With low taxes, a warm climate, and developed healthcare services, this state was once the top choice for millions of Americans seeking a peaceful life after the age of 60. But now, those once praised policies are starting to crack. Not in theory, but right on the streets, where people once believed they would be protected. The heartbreaking reality is, the support system can no longer keep up with the pace of societal change. Social housing programs are overwhelmed, with waiting lists so long that many people have passed away before their turn. The SNAP benefits are not enough to buy basic food during the inflation period. And the healthcare support programs, although they exist on paper, are stifled by convoluted conditions and complex procedures that not everyone in their 70s can fully understand and pursue. The problem does not lie in the lack of laws, but in the disconnect between the law and the people. Additionally, the overlap between different levels of government, federal, state, and local, also puts people in a grey area. A person may qualify for federal assistance, but not be prioritized in the state housing program, or be denied due to not having a stable residence. A paradox when they are homeless. It is precisely in those gaps that people fall through, and often they fall without a safety net. The truth is, many elderly people today are still working to survive, not because they want to, but because they have no other choice. But the policies do not see that. They continue to be overlooked in urban development plans, in real estate tax policies, and even in psychological support programs. Something very necessary as the feeling of abandonment becomes increasingly widespread. We cannot call it welfare if it does not reach those who need it the most. And we cannot call it a civilized society if the law only serves the strong and hides the weak. The fracture does not come from a specific policy. It comes from the silence towards each small injustice, from a denied relief voucher, a delayed medical examination, a temporary shelter being dismantled. All those small things gradually create an ever-growing gap between the people and the system they once trusted. And when trust in the system is eroded, will there still be anyone strong enough to lift them up then? Florida, once dubbed a retirement paradise, is now gradually becoming a place where many elderly people no longer dare to dream of a decent future. When the blazing sun is no longer a symbol of hope, but rather a force that scorches the silver-haired heads waiting in line for charity meals outside the park, one must ask, is the future of this state still as bright as the postcards once promised? In reality, the elderly population in Florida is rapidly increasing, but at the same time, social resources are depleting. When the number of people over 65 years old makes up nearly 21% of the total population, one of the highest rates in the United States, the pressure on the healthcare, housing, and welfare systems is increasingly exceeding their capacity to respond. And while luxury resorts continue to spring up along the coast, with golf courses, spas, and fine dining, many other elderly people are living in cars, using wet wipes instead of showers, and having to choose between buying medicine or paying for dinner. Cities like Miami, Tampa, or Orlando, once ideal retirement destinations, now face the risk of becoming grey zones, not only due to an aging population, but also because of policies that have not adapted in time. In less than 10 years, rental prices in South Florida have more than doubled, while pensions and benefits have remained almost stagnant. It's no longer a market problem. It's a deep pit swallowing the hopes of an entire generation. What is even more concerning is that the story of Florida today could be a forewarning for other states tomorrow. When the development model leans towards real estate speculation, luxury tourism, and attracting the wealthy, ordinary citizens are gradually being pushed out of the future picture. Not because they are unimportant, but because they no longer bring commercial value. Florida used to be a symbol of rest, of the gentle final leg in everyone's life. But if everything continues as it is now, this place will no longer be a promised land, but rather a witness to an entire generation's twilight years sinking into silence, while society keeps spinning as if they never existed. So if we, the ones witnessing this, remain silent, then who will speak up? Florida did not collapse overnight. It cracked little by little, from the silent tents under the bridge, from the missing dinners, to the policies that no longer cared for the people who once built this state. We have walked together through sun-drenched streets, but devoid of human warmth. We have heard the dissonant voices of those who once had dreams, who once believed in an America that leaves no one behind. And we realize what is happening is not merely a housing crisis, it is a fading of responsibility, of humanity, and of the very notion of a community. What do you think about the collapse of Florida's retirement paradise? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel and stay updated with our latest videos. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. This video is made for informational purposes and to raise awareness. All content reflects the social reality from an objective perspective, without being provocative or criticizing any individual, organization, or government. All data and images are compiled from public and reputable sources at the time of production. Viewers are encouraged to verify and contribute their opinions to expand the discussion in a healthy and humane manner.